The morning mist hung low over Windsor Castle. Inside its ancient walls, silence reigned, the kind of silence that comes not from peace, but from heartbreak. As the future King of England stood beside the woman he loved more than life itself, duty stood between them like a ghost neither could banish. For years, William and Catherine had been Britain's symbol of hope, love triumphant, modern royalty reborn. But now, the fairy tale was cracking. Behind the palace walls, two hearts were breaking quietly, privately, beneath the weight of a crown. And when their decision finally became public, it wasn't just a royal family that changed. It was the soul of a nation. Before we dive into this deeply emotional journey, take a second to tap. Like if royal history and real human emotion fascinate you, subscribe for more true, heart-wrenching royal moments, and share this video with someone who still believes in love, even when it hurts. Now, let's step into the palace where love met duty and Britain held its breath. The morning mist rolled across the ancient lawns of Windsor Castle, soft and haunting, like a veil over a broken dream. Inside, the castle's walls seemed to breathe, heavy, ancient, and strangely sorrowful. At the tall window of their private chambers, Catherine, Princess of Wales, stood alone, her fingers lightly resting against the cold glass. Below her, life went on, footmen moving with quiet urgency, advisors whispering in corridors. But something in the air felt unmistakably final. Behind her, a familiar sound, careful footsteps on stone. Prince William entered quietly, the echo of his stride far heavier than his words could ever be. He didn't need to speak. Catherine felt the weight of his silence before she saw his reflection beside her. For weeks, something had been shifting, not in their love, but in the world around it. The burden of royal duty, the endless media scrutiny, and the political tensions that few outsiders would ever truly understand, had driven them to the edge of an impossible choice. Catherine's voice was barely a whisper. "The children are asking questions again." Her breath fogged the glass and she traced a tiny circle with her fingertip, a nervous habit she hadn't realized she developed. "George wants to know why everyone looks so sad. Charlotte keeps asking when things will go back to normal." The word normal hung in the air like a memory, something that no longer existed within their world. William's reflection joined hers in the window. His once bright eyes were hollow, framed by exhaustion no amount of sleep could mend. For years he had been the picture of royal composure, strong, stoic, dependable. But now, that mask was cracking.
"What did you tell them?" he asked softly, though his tone carried the weight of someone bracing for pain. "I told them that sometimes grown-ups had to make very difficult decisions," Catherine replied. Her voice wavered. "But how do we explain something we barely understand ourselves?" The question hung between them, fragile, unanswerable. Outside, the faint sound of bells drifted from the chapel. The same chapel where they had once stood as a young couple, radiant with hope, vowing to love each other for better or worse. Who could have known that the duty, the silence, the sorrow, would be their worst? William reached up, his hand trembling slightly as he brushed away a tear that had slipped down Catherine's cheek. "I keep thinking there must be another way," he murmured. "Something we've missed. Something we haven't tried." Even as he said it, they both knew there wasn't. The machinery of the monarchy was already in motion, ancient and unstoppable. Their love story, once hailed as a revival of a modern monarchy, had become a quiet casualty of history repeating itself. Catherine leaned into his touch, her eyes closing. "Do you remember our wedding day?" she whispered. William's expression softened. "I remember everything," he said. "I couldn't believe you'd choose this life, choose me, knowing what it meant." "I didn't choose a crown," she said simply. "I chose you." The words landed between them like a prayer, or maybe a goodbye. Then came the knock, 3 gentle taps. Their private secretary, James, entered, his face pale. "Your Royal Highnesses, the Prime Minister's office has called. They'll need an answer by tomorrow morning." Catherine's knees almost gave way, and William's arm instinctively found her waist. Tomorrow, that word, So ordinary, suddenly carried the force of destiny. After James left, the clock ticked. Each second felt louder, heavier, crueler. "Whatever happens," William said finally, his voice quiet but certain, "loving you has been the greatest privilege of my life. Not being a prince, not serving the crown, just being your husband." Catherine turned toward him. Her tears had stopped, but her eyes still shimmered. "And whatever tomorrow brings," she said softly, "nothing can erase what we've built, what we've shared, what we are." But deep down, both knew some things were bigger than love. Later that afternoon, they walked through the corridors of St. George's Chapel, the same place where they had once stood before the world as a fairy tale couple. The air was thick with memories. Their footsteps echoed softly. "I used to come here as a boy," William said. "After my mother died, I'd sit right there, in that corner, and talk to her." Catherine followed his gaze to a shadowed alcove near the altar. She could almost see a young William there, lonely and lost, trying to make sense of grief too large for his small shoulders. "What did you tell her?" she asked. "That I was scared," he said quietly. "Scared of disappointing people. Scared of not being strong enough. Scared of losing everyone I loved." He turned to her, his eyes wet. "I'm that boy again, Kate." Her hand found his. "Then we'll be scared together," she said. "We always have been." The moment was intimate, sacred, and broken only by the sound of another door opening. King Charles entered the chapel, slow, dignified, and visibly weary. His eyes were red-rimmed. He looked at them, not as a monarch, but as a father. "I'm sorry," he began, "but the arrangements for tomorrow must be finalized." William's voice cracked. "Father, surely there's another way." Charles shook his head slowly. "Every path has been tried, my son. Every conversation, every compromise. The institution demands clarity." Catherine stepped forward. Her voice trembled, but her words were steady. "Your Majesty, may I ask something? As a mother, not a princess." Charles nodded. "If this were you and Camilla," she asked softly, "if you had to choose between love and duty, what would you tell your heart to do?" For a brief, human moment, the king's mask fell. "That question," he said quietly, "has haunted this family for generations. Edward chose love and lost his throne. My mother chose duty and lost her heart. I tried to have both, and in doing so, I nearly lost everything." The silence that followed was thick, suffocating. 3 generations of heartbreak, repeating again. Catherine looked down at the altar rail, running her fingers across the same spot where she had placed a bouquet years ago. "I keep thinking about all the little girls who watched our wedding," she said, "believing love could conquer anything." William moved closer. "It can," he said fiercely. "It has." Catherine met his eyes, her voice breaking. "But not this." Charles turned away, unable to watch. Outside, the sun dipped behind the clouds, staining the chapel windows in somber hues. It was as if even the light itself were preparing for what tomorrow would bring, the farewell that would shatter Britain. The next morning, Buckingham Palace felt like a storm waiting to break. The corridors, lined with portraits of monarchs long gone, seemed to watch in silent judgment as the family gathered once more behind closed doors. For centuries, these walls had seen political crises, wars, scandals, but nothing quite like this. Nothing so heartbreakingly human. At the long mahogany table, King Charles sat at the head, papers spread before him, his reading glasses perched low on his nose. The atmosphere was thick, suffocating, like a courtroom waiting for its verdict. William and Catherine entered quietly, their hands brushing together, a fleeting, instinctive gesture before duty forced them apart again. "Sit," Charles said softly. His tone wasn't commanding. It was weary, almost apologetic. They did as he asked. For a few moments, no one spoke. Only the ticking of the ornate wall clock filled the silence. It was a sound of time, relentless, merciless, moving them closer to the point of no return. Charles cleared his throat, though his voice trembled slightly. "The Prime Minister has been briefed," he said, "and the Cabinet has agreed on the communication strategy. We'll need to announce by tomorrow morning at the latest." William's jaw clenched. "So that's it? No more discussions? No more chances to find another way. You've both had weeks, Charles replied gently. You know as well as I do what this means, not just for the family, but for the crown itself. The word crown hung between them like a curse. Catherine looked down at her hands, clasped tightly in her lap. Her wedding ring, once a symbol of unbreakable unity, now felt like both comfort and chain. We gave everything we could, she whispered. Our time, our privacy, our peace. Isn't that enough? Charles's eyes softened. You gave more than enough, my dear. But the public, they see you not as people, but as symbols. You represent stability, hope. And symbols can't be human, William said bitterly. They can't make mistakes. They can't fall apart. For a moment, no one dared breathe. Finally, Charles rose from his chair, moving to the window. Outside, journalists already lingered beyond the palace gates, their cameras waiting like vultures for the first sign of movement. You must understand, Charles said quietly, still looking out at the grey London sky. The monarchy survives only because the people believe it's stronger than emotion, stronger than love. Catherine's voice broke the stillness. But that's a tragedy, isn't it? The thing that keeps the monarchy alive is the very thing that keeps the people inside it from truly living. Charles turned, his eyes shimmering. You think I don't know that? He said, voice cracking for the first time. I lived it. Your late mother-in-law lived it. And now, heartbreakingly, so do you. William stood abruptly. The composure drilled into him from childhood was slipping. Then maybe it's time to change that, Father. Maybe it's time to stop pretending that love is the enemy of duty. The king studied his son for a long moment. Then he sighed, his shoulders slumping under the invisible weight of centuries. You sound like your mother, he murmured. And she, too, believed the world could be changed by love. The room fell into silence again. Outside, faint church bells told the hour, soft, distant, and strangely mournful. That evening, William and Catherine walked through the palace gardens, trying to breathe in a world that suddenly felt smaller. The autumn air was crisp. The roses were long gone, their bare stems reaching toward a gray sky. Catherine's scarf fluttered in the wind, and William reached out instinctively to fix it. That single, wordless gesture said what neither dared to speak aloud. I'm still here. For now. Do you think they'll ever understand? She asked softly. Who? The public. The world. Our children. William hesitated. Maybe one day, he said. Maybe when they are old enough to see that love isn't always enough to win. She looked up at him, searching, hopeful, heartbroken. It should be enough, she whispered. We built our life on that belief. He nodded slowly. And maybe that's what makes it beautiful and tragic all at once. They stopped walking. The palace loomed behind them, majestic and cold, like a monument to everything they were losing. In the distance, a lone bagpiper began playing. The sound drifted through the air, mournful, timeless, carrying the echo of 1,000 royal farewells before theirs. Catherine took a deep breath, her voice trembling. When we first married, I thought the crown would protect us, that love and duty could live side by side. And now? William asked quietly. Now I realize the crown protects itself. We're just part of its story. He reached for her hand, squeezing it gently. Then let's make sure our part means something. That night, as the city lights blink awake across London, William found himself in his study, alone. Letters from advisors covered his desk. Every word was written with careful detachment. Transition arrangements, public expectations, constitutional image. He stared at them, but all he could think about was Catherine upstairs, probably sitting on their bed, brushing her hair in silence, pretending not to cry so the children wouldn't hear. He closed his eyes. In the quiet, he could almost hear his mother's voice, Diana's voice, echoing softly in his mind. Don't let the crown turn your heart to stone, William. He opened his eyes again, and for a brief, fragile moment, he wished he could trade every title, every privilege, every piece of golden ceremony for one more day of peace with the woman he loved. But morning was coming, and with it, the end of everything they had built together. The clock struck midnight. From somewhere deep inside the palace, the sound of distant bells echoed through the halls, low, solemn, final. The farewell that would shatter Britain was no longer a possibility. It was a countdown. The evening sky over Kensington Palace glowed in soft amber and grey, the kind of light that feels like the world holding its breath. Inside, laughter drifted faintly from the garden, carried through the open windows. It was the sound of their children, George, Charlotte, and Louis, playing. For a moment, it sounded like everything was normal. For a moment, they could almost pretend. Catherine stood at the window, watching them, her heart aching with a love too vast contain. George was pushing Charlotte on the swing, and little Louis was chasing a football across the lawn, giggling as he stumbled. "They have no idea," she whispered. Behind her, William stood still, his gaze fixed on the same scene, his hands clenched at his sides. His silence said everything. The decision had been made. The announcement drafted. Tomorrow, the world would know. "How do we tell them?" he asked softly. "How do you explain to a child that everything they know, their home, their family, is about to change forever?" Catherine didn't answer. She couldn't. The words didn't exist. The moment shattered when Charlotte ran toward them, her small arms wide, cheeks flushed from play. "Mommy, Daddy, can we have hot chocolate tonight?" she asked, her voice bubbling with innocence. "And a movie after dinner." Catherine knelt to catch her, hugging her tighter than usual. She inhaled the sweet scent of her daughter's hair as if trying to memorize it forever. "Of course, darling," she whispered. "Anything you want." George followed, slower, more observant. At 10 years old, he already carried the weight of his lineage, that quiet seriousness that reminded everyone he was destined for the crown one day. "You both seem sad," he said carefully. "Is everything all right?" William crouched down, looking into his son's earnest blue eyes. "We'll have a family talk after dinner," he said gently. "There are important things we need to tell you." The boy's brow furrowed, but he nodded, accepting it, because George had already learned that in his family, not every truth could be spoken at once. Dinner that night felt strangely timeless, a snapshot of happiness suspended between heartbreak and history. Catherine had asked the kitchen to prepare all of the children's favorite dishes: roast chicken, mashed potatoes, chocolate pudding. It was a table of comfort, a last stand against what tomorrow would bring. They ate, they laughed, they told stories. For those few precious minutes, they were just a family. Not royals, not symbols, just a mother, a father, and 3 little souls who believed that parents could fix anything. Then, in the middle of dessert, Louis piped up, his voice bright and curious. "Tell us how you met again," he said. Catherine smiled. "You've heard that story 100 times, sweetheart." "I like it," Louis insisted, and Charlotte clapped her hands in agreement. Catherine glanced at William. For a moment, their eyes met, and in that silent exchange was everything: love, nostalgia, sorrow, and a shared memory of the day it had all begun. "Well," Catherine began softly, "Daddy was very handsome in his university uniform, and very shy. He could barely look at me." "That's not true," William protested with mock outrage. "I was confident." "You spilled your drink on my shoes," she teased. The children burst into laughter, and for a few blissful minutes, it felt like the past had returned, like the fairy tale still lived somewhere in the cracks of time. But the laughter faded quickly, replaced by that heavy silence again. William checked his watch. Catherine glanced toward the window. The night was closing in. "Can we build a fort before bed?" George asked hopefully. "Like we used to." "You're still little," Charlotte declared proudly. William smiled faintly. "Enough, you too," he said, but even his gentle correction sounded tired. He looked at Catherine. Their eyes met again. It was time. They gathered in the living room, surrounded by the soft glow of lamps and the familiar scent of home. Pillows from the children's play fort lay scattered across the floor. Catherine sat on the sofa, with Charlotte curled against her side. William stood for a long moment before joining them, as if his legs refused to carry him toward what came next. The children waited expectantly. Catherine took a deep breath. Her voice, when it came, was tender, trembling but steady. "You know how much Mommy and Daddy love you, right?" Three small heads nodded. Sometimes, she continued, grown-ups have to make really hard decisions, even when they love each other very much. George frowned, his mind already racing ahead. Are you and Daddy going to live apart? The question sliced through the air like glass. Catherine's throat tightened. William reached for her hand. Yes, he said quietly, for a little while. But we'll both always be here for you. Always. Charlotte's lip trembled. But why? Catherine pulled her closer. Because sometimes love means protecting the people you care about, even if it hurts. Little Louis looked between his parents, confusion clouding his innocent eyes. Are you still going to love each other? William swallowed hard. Always, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. Nothing can change that. Later that night, the palace was silent again. Catherine sat in the nursery, rocking a sleepy Louis in her arms. His small hand rested against her shoulder. Across the room, Charlotte lay curled on her bed, her tear-streaked face pressed against her pillow. Down the hallway, William stood outside George's door, listening. No sound, no crying, just silence, and somehow that was worse. He knocked softly before stepping in. George was sitting at his desk, staring out the window. London glittered beyond the glass, a city unaware that its future king was learning heartbreak too soon. George, William said quietly, can we talk? Is there anything left to talk about? The boy asked without turning. William sat beside him. There's always something to talk about, he said, especially when it's about us. George turned finally, his eyes shining with unshed tears. You're leaving, you and Mommy, and you're just okay with that. William felt his chest tighten. No, he said honestly, but sometimes doing the right thing feels nothing like being okay. George's voice cracked. Then why do it? Why hurt everyone if you're not sure it's right? William exhaled, steady but broken, because not choosing, not acting, can hurt even more, and because one day, when you're older, you'll face choices like this too. I want you to remember that love and duty don't always walk the same road, but both matter. He reached out, resting a hand on his son's shoulder. You will always be my son, he said. Nothing in this world can change that. George hesitated, then leaned into his father's arms, finally letting the tears come. And for a few quiet minutes, the future king cried like the child he still was. That night, as the clock struck midnight, both parents stood alone in the hallway between their children's rooms, separated by silence, united by grief. Tomorrow would bring the press, the cameras, the headlines. But tonight was just about saying goodbye. Their last goodnight as one family. Morning came with a quiet drizzle, gray, cold, and heavy, as if even the sky refused to stay indifferent. Inside Kensington Palace, the hum of preparation began before dawn. Aides whispered. Cars lined the driveway. Cameras waited beyond the gates, their lenses pointed toward history. In the royal bedroom, Catherine stood before the mirror. Her reflection looked composed, regal, but her eyes betrayed the storm within. She wore a simple navy dress, chosen for dignity, not beauty. Her hands trembled as she applied a final touch of makeup. In the doorway, William appeared, dressed in his formal suit. He looked like a man carved from restraint. But even the steel in his posture couldn't hide the small tremor in his hands as he adjusted his tie. The cars will be here in an hour, he said quietly. Catherine nodded. She didn't trust her voice. They had rehearsed their statements, every word weighed by advisers and officials. They would speak together, united, yet divided forever. A soft knock. Come in, William said. The door opened. George stood there in his school uniform, looking impossibly grown for his 10 years. His eyes were red from a night without sleep. I wanted to say goodbye before you go, he murmured. Catherine knelt, straightening his tie with trembling fingers. It's not goodbye, darling. You'll see me soon. I promise. He nodded, but the set of his jaw said he didn't quite believe her. Behind him, Charlotte appeared, holding her stuffed bunny, and Louis, clutching a toy car. They looked confused, still half asleep. Will you be home for dinner? Louis asked, innocent and hopeful. Catherine's lips quivered. Not tonight, sweetheart. But very soon, William's composure cracked. He knelt, pulling all three children close. "You are our greatest pride," he whispered. "Whatever happens today, remember that." The children clung to him, small arms, pure love, unaware that this simple family moment would become the last of its kind. As the cars pulled away, Catherine looked back through the rear window. George stood at the window upstairs, watching, face pressed to the glass. Charlotte waved, her little hand trembling. Louis waved too, smiling, because he still believed smiles could fix everything. Catherine's breath hitched. William reached over, squeezing her hand once, briefly, silently, before letting go. From this moment forward, they would stand apart. The motorcade rolled through London, past familiar landmarks, the parks, the palace gates, the crowds gathering with worried curiosity. The city that had cheered for their wedding, for their love story, now braced for heartbreak. At Buckingham Palace, the air buzzed with media anticipation. Cameras clicked. Commentators whispered. The world waited. Inside the throne room, two podiums stood side by side, close enough for symbolism, far enough for separation. The space between them was small, but it felt like an ocean. When they entered, the clicking of cameras became thunder. William's face was composed, Catherine's luminous in sorrow. They looked every inch of royalty the world admired, and yet so deeply human in their pain. William stepped to his podium first. His voice, steady but low, filled the room. "Thank you for being here today. The Princess of Wales and I have asked you here to share news that is deeply personal and deeply important for the future of the monarchy." He paused, his gaze flicking briefly to Catherine. "After careful consideration and in consultation with His Majesty the King, we have decided to live separately while we navigate the constitutional challenges surrounding our roles and responsibilities." The room gasped. It wasn't unexpected, but hearing it, seeing it, feeling the gravity of it, was different. Catherine stepped forward, her voice soft yet resolute. "Our love for each other remains unchanged. Our commitment to our children remains absolute. Our dedication to the people of Britain and the Commonwealth remains unwavering. But sometimes, serving those we love requires choices that break our hearts." Flashes burst across the room like lightning. Reporters shouted questions. Was it permanent? What did this mean for Prince George? Would she keep her titles? William answered calmly, though each word felt like it cost him a piece of his soul. "We cannot predict what the future holds. Our hope is for understanding, and for time to heal what must now change." Catherine's voice faltered as she added, "We ask only for kindness, for our children, and for each other." And then, one final question, gentle, hesitant, from a young reporter in the front row. "Your Royal Highnesses, what would you like the world to remember about your time together?" For the first time, William's voice broke. "That love is real," he said. "That two people can love each other completely and still face impossible choices. And that duty sometimes asks more than the heart can give." Catherine's tears glistened as she continued. "Every day we spent together was a gift. Every moment, a privilege. That doesn't end today." When the press conference ended, they turned toward each other. In front of the world's cameras, William reached out, and Catherine's hand found his. That final image, their fingers intertwined, eyes locked through tears, would become one of the most iconic photographs in modern royal history. It was love. It was loss. It was everything human about royalty laid bare. As they left the palace, walking side by side but no longer together, the sound of shutters followed them like a requiem. Outside, London wept. Rain mingled with tears on the faces of those who had gathered. Across Britain, televisions flickered with the breaking news. The fairy tale was over. Yet, in that heartbreak, something else remained, something raw, real, and unforgettable. The monarchy had asked them to sacrifice their happiness. But in doing so, William and Catherine had given the world something greater, a final reminder that even the most powerful hearts can break with grace. As the rain fell over Buckingham Palace, the people of Britain stood in silence, not out of shock, but out of understanding. They had witnessed something rare, royalty stripped of its armor, love laid bare beneath the crown. William and Catherine's story became more than a royal chapter. It became a mirror A reminder that behind every title, every tradition, every duty, there beats a human heart. And maybe, in that heartbreak, the world found a new kind of hope, that even when love must yield to duty, it never truly dies. It just changes shape, waiting quietly for the day it can breathe again. Because sometimes the greatest love stories don't end in forever. They end in sacrifice. If this story moved you, take a moment to like, subscribe, and share this video. Because somewhere, someone still believes that love, even royal love, is worth fighting for.